Okay, I'm on my.
Thank you, Toja, Altina, and Wopila Chapashi, Sydney, for that beautiful song. Opening the door to ask the Creator to come in and help us. We all need a lot of help, and we're all going through something, all of our families. And my condolences, sympathies to all the people that have lost somebody recently and in the past year. There's been a lot of losses that we've had. So today we're going to, our day will be similar to last time. We'll go for about an hour, maybe to about 2:15, and then we'll take a break till about 2:30. And then we'll go till about maybe 3:45, and then we'll process what we heard, what we shared, and then we'll go to the next part of our evening, which is whatever it's going to be. Some of you might have plans this evening, or some of you might be working late, or whatever it is. But I just like to greet all of you. Mitakuye pi iuha chantewashte wachiankapi. I see all of you with a glad and happy heart. Thank you. And let me see here if I can share my screen. And again, if you have anything comes up for you that, you know, regarding what we're sharing, what I'm sharing, and if there's any kind of emotions, then I would really encourage you to have some sage. You might see the smoke here, but I know you probably can't see it. Yeah, here it is, the shal and the sage. And I think that's really important to have, you know, on hand all the time. So if you do, something comes up, then just, you know, wazilia, smudge yourself off, and, you know, comfort your spirit, because, you know, only we can do that. So remember, we ended here. We talked about the Oina Jitopa, the 4 stages of life, and the interrupted journey. And we talked about how we still come from the Hiata. Everybody does. Everybody's meant to be here. Everybody has a purpose in life, and everybody has skills and strengths and talents. So sometimes those strengths, skills, and talents are covered up, I guess, by things that happen to us, either pre-birth or, you know, after we come to this earth. So in this sad model here, many people are disconnected from the Lakota cultural ways and the strengths and the ceremonies. A lot of our people did not get what they should have gotten whenever pre-birth, like the ceremonies, and then in that first stage of life, all the ceremonies that really build a strong journey, you know, through the next stages of life. And what that results in is few elders. I won't say no elders, but few elders to pass on the teachings, to keep social order, custom law, spiritual order. And that return to the spirit world is characterized by illness, or, you know, trauma, some kind of, you know, accidental death, or even suicide, you know. So this is what we are trying to avoid, and this is what we're trying to address. And when I say we, I mean all of us in this room, this virtual room. We all have a contribution to make sure that these things don't happen, that the interruptions to the growth of the spirit of the child, make sure that they you know, that they get addressed in a culturally appropriate way. And I would like to say too that there's so many tools out there, you know, all kinds of tools and all kinds of programs and different types of resources that can help us. You know, it's not just one way, or it's not, you know, just you know, a certain way that's we're going to get help. It's from everywhere, because look around us. You know, we have so much talent out there, so much, like right now where I'm sitting, I'm in Porcupine, and I can see across the road, and I see horses running, and those are, you know, a resource. They're relatives, but they're a resource. They have the power to heal. They have the power to draw things out of our bodies and out of our minds if we believe. Now, that's something that is really important to discuss, I think, because if we think that it's superstition, or if we think that it's mythology, you know, if we put it in that category, then it doesn't really serve any purpose for us. So there's a term in Lakota, it's called woichala. Woichala is from the word wichakhe. Wichakhe is like that's the way it is, or that's the truth, or that's, you know, true. I won't say truth, true. It has integrity, you know, there's a whole deep conceptual meaning behind the word wichakhe. Wichakhe, he wichakhe. Whenever we say that, then it's, yes, that's the way it is. That's the reality, or that's you know, I guess the truth, or that's true, you know. So whenever we say woichala, what we're saying is wo is the collective, wichala is like, yes, I believe in that, you know, yes, I uphold that. So the woichala doesn't exactly mean believe, but it refers to that. So like, say, for example, an owl brings a, you know, a message. So the owl is a relative. That's how we see. That's our worldview. The owl, the hiha, is a relative. So when the relative comes and hoots behind our house, or in front of our house, or around our house, they're bringing a message. Now, what is that message? If we were as evolved as we were thousands of years ago, we could understand that owl, you know, what the owl is saying. But we've devolved. So we're to the point now where, you know, we don't, whenever we hear dogs barking, whenever we hear owl hooting, whenever we hear, you know, whatever we hear, then, you know, that's just, you know, an owl hooting. That's just a dog barking, but they're actually speaking. So, and we don't really understand that. So when an owl comes and is hooting around our house, then we've become a kind of like a, how would you say it, to the point where we say that owl is bad, or that owl is evil, you know, and we go out, chase it away, and we say, don't come around here, don't, you know, you're bringing a warning, you know, like that. But in actuality, that owl is being a good relative and telling us, you know, something's going to happen, so pray, you know. And that's the response that we should have. And we should say wopila, you know, to the great appreciation, you know, to the owl, and to make offerings and to pray about it, that we can prevent whatever it is that's coming. But see, that's what I mean by woichala. If we believe that way, that certain conditions, when certain conditions exist, then certain things can happen, you know. So it's really about our own belief system that we have to, you know, we have to really examine that, you know, what is our belief system. So there's a book, it's called The Price of a Gift, and it's about Lakota traditional healer, Lekshi Joe Eagle Elk. And I apologize for saying his name right now, but he, in that book, then he wrote it with Jerry Mohat, who is has since passed on. Jerry Mohat is a clinical psychologist, and he started out as a Jesuit on the Rosebud Sioux Tribe reservation. And he learned to speak the language, and he was really, really immersed himself into the, you know, culture and community there. And he became friends with Lekshi Joe, and he, they shared writing responsibility, authorship for a book, The Price of a Gift. And in that book, then he shares a lot of his own, you know, like examining his own belief system, like Shi Joe. And one part of the book, then he talks about how this man came to him for healing, and he's an interpreter. So the interpreter role is, here's the spirit world, the hiata, here's the interpreter, and here's the people. So the spirit, from the spirit world, the messages that come, the communication that comes to the interpreter has a role of, I guess, translating that in a way that us ordinary people can understand. So he was told to tell this man, in order to get well, then he needed to go to a creek and he needed to catch a fish by his hands, not with the fishing line and the hook, but with his hands. And he needed to talk to that fish and tell that fish about his illness. And he said, that fish will talk to you, and that fish will, will tell you what you need to do. So he did that. He went out and he was able to catch a fish, and he talked to that fish, and that fish did make a noise. Twice it made a noise, but he couldn't understand it. So he put the fish back in the water, and then he just went on his way. And he said, well, I didn't understand it. I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But one of the things that Joe comments on is that, what if he had come back, to a ceremony, and he had asked, well, what did the fish, I didn't understand the fish. What did the fish say? And what do I need to do next? To seek further guidance and to advocate, for himself. So, but anyway, he died sometime later, but he really ponders that, like Joe, he says, I don't know if what would have happened. Maybe if he had come back, to the ceremony and asked, and maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't have gotten an answer, but maybe he would have. We don't really know that. And he said, so his role was to interpret, the messages, and not to, I guess, to make a judgment. So whenever you think about that, like the humility of that, of the self-reflection, of our belief system, of his belief system, and how we interpret that, and how we interpret things, and how we translate things, So one of the things that often comes up is, well, what does that mean, to, whenever the spirit is interrupted, the growth, what that means is that, like in anything else, like say if you take some, take a knife and you cut something, then that leaves a wound and it leaves a scar. Now there's things that can leave a wound and leave a scar on the spirit. And in that sense, then the spirit's growth is interrupted. So that's what this means, an interrupted journey. And that's what that little squiggly line means. Now, what's the consideration and impact on the other stages of life? So it's really tragic, but when those wounds are not addressed, when they don't get, what they need, then it can end up to be overwhelming for the individual, and they can reach out for other, unhealthy coping skills, like perhaps drinking, drugging, smoking weed, self-mutilation, suicide attempts, death by suicide. Just wandering lost, like many of our, relatives on the street, they're living on the streets, like Jeb Kunshi mentioned, somebody passing, under in Rapid City, one of the relatives. And I always think, what if we really talk to the individuals and asked, what was your life like? What did you go through? And I think a lot of times we try to help by, how would you say it, by imposing, or maybe not imposing, but saying, well, this is what you need. And not really asking people, well, what did you go through? What do you think, is going to help you? What do you need, So I think those questions are really critical, in this model here, because otherwise we're losing relatives, and not just to physical death, but to spiritual death, and so we really have to intervene at a very early age. So how many of you, and you don't have to respond, out loud or anything, but just think about this question. How many of you know something that happened that was traumatic and children were involved? So one of the things that I've always promoted is that whenever the police respond to some kind of traumatic event, then there should be some note or some way to document who was there, and what age were they? Were they children under the age of 10? Were they adolescents? And there should be a way to connect to them and provide that early intervention using a culturally appropriate, healing informed response. How do we put that into place? We cite privacy concerns. Yesterday, I was on a meeting, and one of the things we're discussing is women's equity and the protection of women and girls in particular. And somebody was on there from an agency that talked about how during the pandemic, crime didn't stop. Many of our children were sexually abused and physically abused in the homes by relatives or people staying in their homes. So whenever they got back to school, then they would tell their teachers, or they would tell the counselors. So they're mandated to report. So then they reported, and this lady said that their investigation caseload was really, really high. So how do we, what kind of pathways can we create so that we can do an early intervention? I talked to a relative yesterday from a children's shelter on a neighboring reservation, and this relative said, we just took in a week-old baby that was abandoned. He said, so we have that baby here that's only a week old. And so these types of stories and these statistics can numb us, can desensitize us to the point where, oh yeah, that's the way it is, But we really have to put our collective, how would you say it? Responsibility, collective compassion, collective action, in force, so that we can respond to these things. So think about that as we are going through, this training. All of this is like a background. We're starting broad, and then we're going to narrow down to the actual Lakota mental health, first aid approach. But I think the background and the foundation is really, really important. So this is where we left off, and I wanted to make sure that we had a review. And I would also like to comment that, Botakuya, the kinship system, is, really weakened in contemporary Lakota society. And we really have to take action to strengthen it. And one way that can be done is to use the kinship terms, and if we take small steps like that. Okay, so where's the kinship chart? Those of you that did not receive a Lakota mental health first aid manual, then, Toja Altina, I don't know what the possibility is of getting that manual for, the participants. I know that they were purchased for, the staff at OHC Behavioral Health and some other projects, but I don't think, some of the participants here don't have that. But there is a kinship chart in there, and how the males say the kinship terms, how the females say the kinship terms, and the phonetic spelling, and the translation. So that chart is in that manual, in that book. So I think that is one small step, but it's also a huge step, you know, to say we're Lakota, we will use what was given to us, the gifts that were given to us. One of the gifts that was given to us is wotakuye, is a strong sense of valuing our relatives, of kinship. So we're going to express that. We're going to use the kinship terms. And whenever we use it in the Lakota mental health first aid model, then what we're doing is we're saying to these young people, you belong. You know, I am your, for example, me, I am your unchi, you know, I'm your grandmother. You are my takoja, you know, even if we're not blood related. And that in itself says to the youth, you are valued, you know. And so maybe that message has never been given to the young person, you know, to use those kinship terms to explain it and to have that sense of belonging and that sense of being valued. One small step, so think about that. And it does get awkward in, you know, in any setting because people aren't accustomed to it. And unfortunately, it's like a foreign, you know, foreign concept to many people, even Lakota people, because we have been so westernized, you know, and we've been so influenced by a Western education system where, you know, we are in a world where competition, you know, rules, where we compete against each other, and where you know, we have all of these challenges and barriers that divide us, you know. So one of the ways that can bring us closer together is to use those, you know, those kinship terms. So I just wanted to really, really emphasize that, because that's one of the basic principles of Lakota mental health first aid. So when you, yes,
I was just able to share the kinship terms document that you shared with me. So I posted it in the chat. It's not the whole manual. It's just the kinship terms that you shared with me.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Shideshi. So you have that. So you can print it out or save it on your computer or on your phone, and you can go home this evening and you can use it with your relatives, with your family, and talk about it and discuss it. And a lot of times when we do the exercise of using kinship terms, and people will laugh, or they'll kind of, you know, have an awkward feeling about it. That's okay, you know, that's fine. We just need to get through that and cross that bridge and start using the, you know, the Lakota kinship terms with each other. So if you look at this tree, you know, this tree is has hutkan. The hutkan are the roots, and those roots of this tree, just imagine this being a person. The roots include traditional teachings, ancestral strengths, ancestral knowledge, individual strengths, but it also includes the historical trauma, the individual trauma, or the collective trauma. So every year on December 29th, we go to Wounded Knee, South Dakota, and we take wasna, we take cherry juice, you know, we take songs, we take prayers, because we don't ever want to, you know, forget what our relatives went through, the over 300 relatives that were massacred there by the US Army, you know. And so that's part of our ancestral grief, I guess, our collective trauma, our collective grief. It hasn't gone away, and you know, it's not going to go away. That's burned into our ancestral genetic memory, you know, the things that happened to us. And we really have to not use it as a, how would you say, excuse, but to use it as a incentive, you know, that this will never happen again, that we can heal from that, you know, we can heal from the individual trauma. So I have a unexpected visitor, so I'm gonna turn off my camera and mute myself for just about 5 minutes.
If you guys want to take a couple minutes to stand up and stretch while Ethleen is taking care of business, you have about 5 minutes to do so. Thank you, Rich, for sharing the PDF for everyone. Those of you, if we have extra manuals for the Lakota mental health manuals, I can either email those to you if you're interested in that. Otherwise, I'll have to double check and see what we have here for actual manuals left.
Can you close out Altina?
Okay, you back?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I told him to stand up and stretch.
Oh, good.
All
That's
right.
good. So whenever we look at the Hutka, the root, then just think about our roots, your own roots. You know, what does that involve? You know, like I could think back about you know, like some very wonderful, beautiful memories that I have, you know, of childhood. And then I could also think of some very painful things that have happened in my childhood and growing up, you know. So all of those things inform who we are, you know, and how we are. And what that means in terms of how we are is translated to Och'ah. So the Och'ah is the way of being. So some of you might have heard Och'ah Shicha. Helila Och'ah Shicha. That's a phrase that people will say whenever they encounter somebody that's very, you know, irritable and very crabby and has a real negative demeanor. or they'll say, Helila och anwaste, where somebody has a positive attitude and they're very cheerful, you know, like that. So that way of being, you know, that is informed by the things that have happened to us, you know, and it's not a judgment. What it is explanation, you know, not, and again, not to excuse, you know, anybody or somebody for being the way they are, but to just say, well, this is what's happened, you know. So part of that might be substance abuse and might be rageful. Some of you have come across, you know, people that are everything is negative, you know. They're the people that whenever you say good morning, then they'll say, what's good about it, you know, and then they slam things down. They make known their you know, that they're displeased, you know, with life. and it's not necessarily you know, that they dislike or anything. That's their their way of being. Inability to bond or maintain relationships, depression, you know, anxiety. But on the other hand, there's strength-based traits, resiliency. You know, there's people that have been through horrific things and they're still forging ahead. They still have the resiliency, the fortitude, the positive attitude, that they're compassionate, you know, they're strong and sensitive. So it really depends, you know, how people, you know, interpret that and how they process it, I guess. So whenever you come across young people, like say in this, or children in this Lakota mental health first aid model, the first thing that you're going to notice is their och'a. Some children will be very withdrawn. They'll be very isolated. They won't want to talk. In fact, they don't talk. Or some of them are really outward, aggressive. You know, I've had encounters with young people and trying to engage them, and they say things like, "Oh, what do you know? You know, who do you think you are telling me that?" You know, and that's their och'a. You know, though we can't take that personal. So the observation, you know, of their och'a is real important, and to respond accordingly. So I've noticed that, you know, in some helping fields that there's, whenever people don't want to talk, then they keep at them, and, you know, just, you know, well, say something, you know, and it's like being forced, and it's being, you know, being overwhelmed again, you know. So we really have to be careful with how we respond to their och'a. Whenever we, historically, we had a traditional circle of support. So we might have had a strong nacha, you know, we might have had a strong, you know, head person that we could go to. Some people call them, like in some tribes, they say clan fathers or clan mothers. Some people will, you know, say nacha, which means a head person, you know, of the tioshpai. They're not elected, they're not voted in, but they have that designation by the people. You know, they've proven themselves to have that, you know, ability and the compassion and all of that to lead, you know, their tioshpai. So part of that circle of support is the tioshpai, is the extended family. And it might include lekshi, the uncle, which is a second dad, a tui, which is an aunt, second mother, might have unchi and kaka, the grandparents, or unchi and lala, or kunshi and lala, you know, however the term is for the grandparents. A strong tiwahe. You might have a wapio wichasha, like a traditional healer in that circle of support, and they might have kola. That's how the males, you know, what they call friends. Females would call their female friends mashke. Their peers, you know, they would be in their circle of support. So it was pretty strong, you know. It was a strong network of support for this individual. So, you know, that is something that we are trying to get back to. You know, how do we get back to that? We have to adapt. One of the ways that we can adapt is that we become the Tioshpai, we become the extended family, we become the relatives, we become, somebody might be the Lekshi, somebody might be the Tongi, somebody might be the grandmother, grandfather. So we have to think about it in terms of how we can adapt and how we can put it back into action. So we have a contemporary circle of care for help for the individual. So we might have, we still might have the friends, the peers, we still might have family, we might have, talking circles, physical self-care, the otakuye, the kinship, the counseling. We might have grandmothers, raising grandchildren, or grandparents raising grandchildren. We might have, the foster care system. It really depends, who and what is in that child's life. So think about Rapid City. So sometimes when I drive through there, then I'll see young people, maybe around the age of 14, 15, walking on the street. And I often wonder, where do they go for support? And I know that there's some wonderful resources in Rapid City for Native youth, but I often wonder, like, when those resources aren't there, like, I don't know, the games or the powwows or, what talking circles, whatever they are, what do they go home to, and what does the family need? So one of the things that I've always promoted is for training for families, and community, because that will stay there, that will stay with them. And service providers, training is often provided to service providers, which is good, it's important. However, there's a high turnover, in the helping field, in the law enforcement field. So we really have to think about including, family and community in our training sessions, and make sure that the supports that they need are there, and to strengthen, the circle for the child. So whenever we talk about the stages of life, then we also have the 7 transitions in the life cycle. Oinaji Shakoi. Oinaji is like the stage or the transition, and Shakoi is the 7. So within that 4 stages of life are 7 transitions. Now, each one of these is a celebration. So whenever that star on the left of the blue circle and the red circle, that represents the spirit world. So whenever that the young woman first knows she's pregnant, and that's a celebration, so we come together, pray and give thanks, and make sure that, we give her and, the father support and guidance. So the child exists in the womb and in the spirit world as Hokshi Nahi. Hokshi is infant, Nahi is spirit. So it's infant spirit that is in the womb. And then when infant spirit comes to earth, is born, then they become Hokshichala. Hokshichala is the infant. And then when they transition to maybe walking, they can walk good on their own, they can talk, then they transition to Wakayaja. So for the boy, that would be Hokshila, and for the girl, that would be Ruchinchala. And then whenever they get to, in the male cycle of life, when they get to the age of where their voice changes and to a deeper tone, then they transition to Koshkalaka, which is a young man, an adolescent. And then whenever they go out on their own and they start, their own family or their own home, then they're Vichasha. And then whenever they transition to elderhood, and that might be, 60 years old, maybe around there, they transition to Vichachala, and then whenever they transition back to the spirit world, Vichunke, then, they go back to the spirit world. So each one of those transitions for this male cycle of life should be a celebration. You know, how can we put into place those celebrations that will acknowledge that transition and that will give that individual a boost to go to the next stage of next transition or next stage of life, you know, in a strong way. For the females, it's still, you know, they come from the spirit world. They exist as Hokshinahi in the womb. And when they're born, Hokshichala, and then Makaija, Richinchala, and then they transition whenever they get their first monthly purification to Vikoshkalaka, young woman or adolescent. And whenever they transition to having their own family, having their own home, then they're Wia. And then when they transition to right around 60 years old, they become Winukshala. And then going back to the spirit world, Wichunte. Wichunte refers to leaving their physical body. So I think we don't celebrate enough the transitions in life. And I think if we did, whether it's in the community or in the family or both or in schools, all three, then we would see, I think, a increase in self-esteem, you know, self-efficacy, you know, where that they feel like they can do things, you know, on their own. So that's I guess something to consider, you know, as far as like the you know, what can we put into place, you know, to do that, you know, celebration. And each one of these names, you know, have a conceptual meaning. So whenever I say Wia, you know, and people will say, oh, that means woman, you know, what we're actually saying is the we is from Hahewi and Ia, which is the stone. And the stone is a reference to the strength, everlasting strength. So Hahewi, the moon, the daughter of the moon, and everlasting strength. So that's the, I guess, the translation for Wia. And then Winukshala isn't, they might translate it to elder woman or old woman, but it's actually, again, Hahewi from the moon, we, and then Cha, that strong, you know, bloomed, fully bloomed, like a big strong tree, you know, La, term of endearment, precious, treasured, you know. So Winukshala is actually precious, treasured female source of strength. And the same way with the Vichakchala, you know, the we is from Ampewi, the sun, you know, we in the Lakota worldview, then the males are the sons of the sun. Cha, strong, La, term of endearment, precious. So it's translated as precious, treasured male source of strength. So those are, I mean, the language to me is really beautiful because it has concepts in it that are action oriented. So that's what we strive for this little girl in the womb to be. We want her to be a Winukshala. We want her to be a precious, treasured female source of strength. And the little boy in the womb, then we want him to grow to be a strong, you know, precious, treasured male source of strength. But there's some, you know, that's a journey, and we're all responsible for making sure that that happens. And so any questions or comments? Anything in the chat, Toja?
I do not have anything in the chat for questions at this time.
Did I put you all to sleep? What are you thinking? What's on your mind after you thought of?
Not to sleep. Not to sleep.
Go ahead, Chicheshi. What's your thoughts? What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to let you know I wasn't sleeping.
But I know you have something on your mind, so go ahead and say it.
No, I don't. I just wanted to let you know I wasn't sleeping, that I'm appreciating learning. So I don't have any thoughts to share right now other than thank you.
Okay, let me see, Jepkashi, Sydney. Any thoughts, comments?
I do have somebody in the comments that stated, it's interesting that the language has one word for child and infant and not different in gender.
Can you repeat that, Pooja?
The comments in the chat said, it's interesting that the language has one word for child and infant and not different in gender.
Yeah, it is. I've never noticed that, but we might say Hokshichala, Wichinchala for infant girl. I don't know. I've never heard anything like that. So thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else?
Trivia, Afraid of Lightning Credit, said, I'm appreciative of our language. It has a deep context and its affirmations to us individually, and especially for our youth. It is important to know the meaning of our language.
Most definitely, Toja. So whenever we think about the language, you know, like, and again, going back to those kinship terms, if we were to say, rather than using a name with the young people or the relatives that come to us for help, but if we explain to them to make that transition into, for example, not just saying it, but saying, I'm going to call you Toshka, I'm going to call you nephew. And the reason I'm calling you nephew is because we're relatives, even if we're not related, you know, by blood. So, and then if you choose to, you can call me Kui, which means aunt. You know, and to make that, how would you say, like a teaching moment, you know. Any other comments, questions?
Another comment said, I am happy to hear the breakdown of the meaning of elder, woman, and man. I've never heard that before. Thank you. PJ Beaudry says, I think in English, the meaning of kinship terms are probably there, but buried and not really acknowledged day to day. Having a direct connection between the language and meaning must be very valuable as a constant reminder.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that, Toshka, that comment. Okay, so we will go on. So does anybody have thoughts about the celebration of these transitions? Like, what are you thinking? How can we put that into place? Like, say, for family, for community, for schools? What are your ideas about that?
Well, I know, this is Eltina. I know that some schools do 8th grade graduation, kind of to acknowledge our youth from transitioning from, you know, their middle school years into their high school years. And so for me, that's not something that I grew up with, but now I'm noticing it's a really big theme. You know, and the same thing with graduating high school, they're incorporating a lot of our Lakota traditional values, you know, getting them, you know, an eagle, feather, or plume, and acknowledging them as, you know, an accomplishment. So that's something that I'm noticing that community members are doing.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, you know, if we were to say, I think I mentioned this last time, that if we were to say, well, how many Native youth are in the age of 11, 12, 13 years old in Rapid City community? And if they, whatever age they are, then then we could have some type of transitional teachings. You know, we can adapt that way, because a lot of times, again, people can't do the, you know, the ceremonies, the coming of age ceremonies, the same way with the girls too. So again, it becomes that, oh, okay, so how are we going to do this? You know, we've been disconnected from it, but we're going to adapt, and we're going to try to reconnect and put these things into action. So think about it that way. Think about action, action. Toja, Heather has a question. Go ahead, or a comment. Hi, Toja.
Hi, Tui. Thank you so much for this day and these teachings. I work in middle school, so working with these precious ages where they are having that transition to Koshkalaka, Nawi Koshkalaka, and so working with the Koshkalaka in particular, when as a school social worker, and when they have, like, when there's certain young ones who might be having their monthly sacred time, that sometimes if they're feeling like any physical discomfort or anything, that they can come and get supplies, and also just spend that time focusing on themselves and in meeting and like taking care of themselves. And it just, as you shared this too, it just reminds me that this is such a good opportunity to also take that time to offer teachings, and when they come to meet, when they because it's pretty regularly once a month, when the young Koshkalaka in particular will not really feel comfortable in school or have some discomfort and want to have a moment away to meet. And so to really be intentional with that time, and some teachings during that time too, and some gifts also to honor their womanhood that we could also maybe provide from the school. And then also thinking for if there was an appropriate way for like also honor the Koshkalaka too, as they're in middle school in this age and this stage of their life. Just some thoughts I had and things that are going through my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Toja. Those are, I think, really important suggestions about being, you know, particularly about being intentional and knowing that, you know, that there's a cycle going on, you know, and that whenever there's a calendar, like the monthly calendar time, that is the time to put things into place that don't overwhelm them. You know, so, Pila, thank you for that. We are going to be talking about Wo'opre Shakoi. The Wo'opre is the law. Shakoi is 7. So we were given 7 sacred laws, if you recall. And you know, this was brought to us by, you know, from the spirit world, and it was given to us with the intention, I believe, you know, for us to live by these laws and to keep ourselves in balance, not only as individuals, but also as families and as communities. So it's kind of an involved, you know, discussion. So I think I would like to take a break now rather than start it, and then, you know, have to take a break right in the middle of a discussion. So it's 2:01, so why don't we come back at 2:16? 15-minute break. Walk around, get some water, stretch, do all that, okay?
Welcome back, everybody. Just a heads up, Tumi Ethleen is having technical difficulties, so she will be on shortly. So just giving you guys all a heads up, making sure everybody can still hear us okay. Thank you, PJ. Perfect.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay, good. Yeah. I'll share my screen again. So the 7 spiritual laws that were given to us, again, were given to us to keep us in balance and to give us guidance and to govern ourselves. So think about governance. Governance in terms of not government, but governance. So we have laws, right, within the county, within the state, within the tribe, you know. So, but these laws here are unwritten, and there are consequences to laws, you know, according to tribal codes, you know, whatever the federal penal code, you know, whatever. What are the consequences whenever we break these laws? You know, we have a belief in Lakota worldview that whenever these laws are broken, then they come back. They make a circle and they come back to us, and we're the ones that bear that consequence. So it's not like a punishment, you know, or it's not like, but it's a natural law, I guess, natural consequence of breaking these laws. So they're not, I mean, they could be called values, they could be called principles, they could be called, I would prefer to call them laws because it gives it more substance. It gives a concept more, it speaks to responsibility that we have to live by these laws because they were given to us as, you know, as a gift to keep ourselves in balance. So this Tiikcha, this tipi, ti is dwell, ikcha is common. So that's the word for tipi. But again, tipi is T is dwell, B is what do they call it? Collective. So they dwell. So there's 2 kind of meanings there. So this common dwelling was not, how would you say it? Was not just a shelter. So how did we learn about the tiikcha? How did we learn about the tipi? So we learn from the children. You know, we learn a lot of different things from our relatives out there, like animals or, you know, the stars, you know, the buffalo. So there were some children playing according to a historical account. And this was whenever we lived in just like we would have the willows and we would put, you know, covers on them, buffalo robes, and that would be our lodge, you know, our lodging. That's how we would shelter. But one day there were some children playing and they had sticks and they put these sticks up and then they wrapped a leaf around it, a tree leaf around it. And they were just playing. And the adults realized that the children were showing them something, that how they could build a shelter. Along with that came teachings about that it's not just a shelter, that it is a sacred place, the Tiikja, the teepee. So there's a lot of variations about, the teachings of the teepee. There's much more involved teachings about the teepee, but for the purposes of this training, we're just going to focus on the laws. So the tripod, there's those 3 yellow circles there. They'll lay down 3 poles, and then they'll measure the teepee size, because there's like 16 foot, 14 foot, the tiny teepees, all the way up to 28 feet, 28-foot teepee. So what they would do is they would measure the canvas to that, or in historical times, they would make buffalo hide teepees. So they would bind it right there where they measured it, and those 3 poles would be bound really tight, because these 3 poles are supposed to hold everything up. So think about that conceptually, not just physically, but conceptually. They're supposed to be strong enough to hold everything together. So those 3 yellow poles represent Ampoli Chakpi, the morning star, and it's a reminder to pray every morning. And the other relative is Sayetu Wichakpi, which is the evening star, and that's the reminder to pray in the evening. When the sun goes down, when the sun transitions, when the day transitions into evening. And then the Wichak Owanji Naji, which Wichakpi is star, Owanji Naji is never moves. So the star that never moves is also called the North Star. And that's the star that is reminds us to pray when evening transitions into night, right around midnight. So, but then if you go to bed earlier than that, then it's a reminder to pray before you go to sleep. So these 3 poles, these tripods, were set up to honor those teachings from the star relatives, to surround ourselves, to have a foundation, the prayer. So once they put that up, they would put a like an offering, like maybe a tobacco offering on one of the poles, or like an eagle feather for protection, and they would have that prayer, and then they would put it up. And then the first pole to be put up after the tripod is Wa'unshila, is compassion. And why Wa'unshila? Why is that law the first pole to be put up? Because it forms the doorway. Once that pole is put up, then the doorway is the entrance is formed. So anybody that enters that tiikja, that teepee, is met with compassion. And so that was intentional. Every other law every other pole with the corresponding law was put up, not in any particular order, but that Wa'unshila was intended to be put up first, so that people would be reminded that whoever comes into your tiikja, into your teepee, is met with Wa'unshila. So think about that conceptually. We don't live in teepees anymore, but we can translate that conceptual belief or conceptual model into a framework for anything, for ourselves. So if we are, when anybody that we meet with compassion, we pray for them. Our families, anybody that comes into our home, they're met with compassion. We pray for them. We provide, food or refreshment for them. If you're a program or if you're a school, then this conceptual model can be applied there too. Anybody that comes into the school or into the program is met with compassion and is therefore provided with basic water, because water is medicine, right? And then food, maybe they haven't eaten in a while. So that's a belief that we have. So all the other laws, the poles that are put up, then they represent, one of the laws, wo'achwala, humility, to, always have that as a way of being, to not think that we are above anybody, and not think that we are better than anybody, but to be humble in our approach, to everything in creation. And that's really difficult, in particularly in today's world, where there is a lot of violence, there is a lot of tension and, stress, and sometimes it's just a natural reaction to react with tension, stress, and, anger or rage. So it's difficult. Woksape, wisdom, not in terms of, people are wiser than each other, but in terms of having the wisdom to make healthy decisions, or, healthy judgments, or healthy choices, and how do we develop that? It's a lifelong endeavor. It's a lifelong journey where, even people that are 70, 80 years old will tell you, I'm still learning. Not everybody knows everything, that it's a lifelong learning journey. So that's something that, we strive for, and we try to instill that into our young people so that they can make, healthy decisions and choices. The next one is Wachante Ogunaka. So if you break down that word, Wa refers to sacred and pure. And it's interesting that the same word for snow is Wa. So whenever we say Wa, then we're saying sacred, pure, but we're also refers to snow. Chante is our heart. Ogunaka is what we hold in our heart. So what do we hold sacred in our heart? So one thing that we might hold sacred in our heart is that we would like everybody to be healthy and to be happy. So if we would like everybody to be, to have what they need and to not, for example, go hungry, then we would be generous with our food, with our, whatever we have. So that's what we hold sacred in our heart. And it's often translated to as, generosity, but there's a much deeper meaning there. Now, Woa Chintanka, I think, is one of the hardest laws to live by, because it's really easy to give up. Fortitude is like the ability to endure. So Woa Chi is, Wo is the collective, Wa Chi is desire, or what we want. Kanka is big or huge in terms of magnitude, not in terms of size. But so what is our great desire? What do we want? And that translates often to fortitude, or the ability to endure. So an example of that might be, say we have a sickness. One of us has a sickness, or a family member has a sickness, then we want them to get well, or we want to get well. So we will go into that Sundance circle, for example, that Sundance ceremony, to sacrifice our hunger, our thirst, dancing in the sun for 4 days without food and water, and that's very, very difficult. And the fortitude to do that, the ability to endure that, is fueled by the desire, the Woa Chintanka, the great desire. We want something to happen as a result of our sacrifice. Maybe we want somebody to get well. Maybe we want somebody to, to heal, or maybe we have a sickness and we want to get well. So that fortitude is real important to develop, and it doesn't come overnight. It's developed over time. So another example might be on how to develop that might be to, like, say our young women, our young girls, whenever they do have a, their first monthly purification, and they're taken into the teepee for the duration of their monthly purification time, and they're given teachings, and they're taught to, different things by the elder women, then one of the things they're teaching her is Woa Chintanka, is fortitude, the ability to endure. And how they're doing that is they give her a beading project. So they'll give her maybe a knife sheath to bead, and they'll say, within this time that you're in here, you're going to work on this and you're going to complete it. Or they might give her a medicine bag. You know, I do know of some that actually complete moccasins during that time, but I think that's really ambitious, and I really applaud and admire those that can do that within those 4 to 5 days. But usually it's something small, you know, that they are given guidance on how to complete. And the reason the completion is important during that time is because that will determine for the rest of their life, you know, what they, you know, the fortitude that they'll have to complete, you know, something, that they won't give up, that they won't, for example, drop out of school, that whenever they do have a, you know, something that is facing them, that they'll keep at it, that they'll complete it. So that fortitude is really important. The other is the woitika, the bravery, and that is something that is, I guess, again, developed over time, you know. And how do we develop, you know, bravery in terms of, like, say, transition ceremonies? So it's very difficult to go out and pray, you know, to have Hamblecha, to Vision Quest, you know, like even for one night, you know. And traditionally then our people went for 4 days and 4 nights without food and water, way out in the hills. They would sit out there and they would pray. That takes a lot of bravery, but it also builds, you know, fortitude. So there was ceremonies and I don't want to call them activities, but practices, I guess, of how we could put these laws into action, because we needed not just for them to be philosophy, like now, you know, like we might have them on the wall and these are our 7 sacred laws, and or we might call them values, but that's where they exist, you know, on the wall. How do we actually put them into action, and how do we live by them, you know? So that's an example of how, you know, bravery can be developed. Another one is wa'ohola, is respect and honor. And it's not just outward, it's inward. You know, how do we respect and honor our spirits? You know, what are we doing for self-care? So many of you are working in a, you know, in a service field where you have to put out a lot of energy, you know, and a lot of emotional energy, maybe physical energy. So how do you replenish? How do you re-strengthen yourself, you know, so that you can continue to be strong, you know, for others? So that would be an example of wa'ohola in terms of your own spirit, your own nagi, you know, how are you going to do that? One way that might translate to is like a wellness plan, a self-care plan, where you would look at not only your physical self, like enough rest, healthy foods, but also your emotional self. You know, who do you talk to? Who do you, you know, who do you have to really share, you know, what you're feeling with, you know, or your nahi, you know, do you have wounds in your spirit that need healing, that need medicine? You know, how do you take care of that? Or your, let's see, your mind, you know, mental exercise. You know, we're told that if we don't use our brain, just like if we don't use our physical muscles, then we're, you know, what do they say? If you don't use it, you lose it. So it's real important to, you know, take care of our mental self too, you know, to read, not just to have the information bites that come at us, you know, through news feeds, or, you know, if you're on social media, you know, getting those news feeds, but to really, you know, get into a, like, say, reading an article, reading a book, you know, and to really try to focus on that. That's exercising your mind. So this conceptual framework, I guess, model approach that is really speaks to the 7 sacred laws is something that can be applied anywhere, and everywhere, So like I said, this can be an individual, how we express these 7 laws and those 3 teachings from the relatives. It can be a family, it can be a community, it can be a school, a program, so it's really up to us on how we want to express that, and to put it into action. So I'd really like to hear from you about what you think, in terms of action items, feasible, realistic ideas that can that would convey these laws to our young people and to our families and to community. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? Elban, what are you thinking? What's your feedback? If you're talking, you're on mute. Or she might have stepped away. What about Anne McGovern, relative from Children's Home Society? What are your thoughts? Maybe she stepped away. Jean.
Mitaka yapi.
Can hear you.
Yeah. Mitaka yapi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's been a while since I've had instruction on our culture. I've lived away for 20 years and becoming familiar with Dakota Lakota ways helps me. Hey, somebody's shunkas are really barking outside. I don't know if you can hear.
Yeah, I can.
I can see him.
Shucks. But it gives me it regenerates hope, because we're taught that every day is a good way, every day is a good day, and we should always approach it in a good way. But when you get caught up with driving and work and hearing about someone testing positive for COVID, it really is a struggle. But so when you hear things that will help us remember that, even though it seems our world is small right around us, that it's much bigger, and so is the universe. And there might be a lot that still we don't understand, that's mysterious, but we do understand that this life is a challenge, and that's to be expected, but that we know there's hope, and that when we go to the next world, we will look back and say, that was a good journey. So I appreciated, especially I had not heard the full explanation of the TP. So I really appreciate that. Wopi datanka. Thank you.
Thank you, Koza. Appreciate your comments. Michael, what are your thoughts? Michael Henry. Really interested in all of your feedback, as I learned from you also. Maybe Michael stepped away. Sarah, Sarah Glenn, any thoughts, feedback?
Tony, we have Sydney Claymore raising her hand.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff Kunshi, I didn't see that, sorry.
I was thinking about what came up for me was Tiole. I know for me when, well, these last few years, I don't know if everybody knows, but I went through an 18-year journey with one of my daughters, and she made her journey home in 2019. So the last few years are really hard sometimes. So I really depend on Tiole. I can go around to my my neighbors and my relatives, some are biological, some are family of choice, as we say in recovery. And that's how I try to stay connected and stay up in a sense, because it's, I never experienced, that's my first loss of a child, and it knocked me for a loop. So as they say, and so to stay spiritually connected, I depend a lot on my relatives, people here at work, that give me time and to listen to when I'm having a hard time, and a lot of meetings. I've had people ask me how they're like, you stayed sober, you stayed during those hard times. And it's like, it's meetings, it's relatives, it's sharing. And so I just wanted to share that Tiole is one of the things that Miate, who his birthday's tomorrow, and he would have been 102. And he always told me that's how we survive, is we had Tiole. We could depend on our relatives and go to their home if we needed something, needed to cry or needed some food or some healing. And so I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff Kunshi. I think that concept itself is something that is, I guess it's fading away among our people. So just for everybody's information, you probably already know this, but T is like a home or dwelling. Ole is to look for. So it's like looking for a home, and that concept isn't just, looking to live there, but like what Jeff Kunshi described is you go there, like for comfort, and people, if this was a, this was a home, like this model here, then people that understood Tiole, like how she described it, then they would meet her with, compassion. They would give her food, they give her water, they would give her, they would be generous with her, with their time, with their, whatever they had, they would give her respect and honor, so, and they would be humble about it. So in this world of, where we're isolated from each other, then we have to, I don't know, how would we create that? Can we have a virtual Tiole? How would we adapt, to this contemporary world? So thank you for that, Jeff Kunshi. Kathy Sharp, any thoughts, comments? If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Tumi, I'm not sure she has a mic. Her mic's not muted and I can't hear anything either.
She's having
Okay.
technical difficulties right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I got it to work. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Well, what I have been thinking in reference to this information regarding the TP right now is I've missed out on a lot of education, and part of that is my fault. But through growing up and so forth, we always had teepees. And I just didn't realize to the depth of what everything stood for and the meaning behind it. So this is extremely helpful.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I wanted to also share that this in itself could be like a healing, I don't know, what's the word, modality. So like say putting up a teepee, when you see a teepee, those of you that are Lakota, then you have something is triggered in your ancestral memory, and people report, and I feel it too, I feel really good whenever I see a teepee, and I feel even better whenever I'm in a teepee. So it's not just the image of it, and it's not just the shelter of it, but it's also the healing energy from Uchimaka, because everything is on the ground, right? We sleep on the ground, we sit on the ground, we eat on the ground. So we're connected to Uchimaka, Grandmother Earth, in a way that, we wouldn't be, because we live in, houses now, and we sit on chairs, we sleep on beds. And so I think the healing modality can be just even having set up a teepee, and have people sit in there, and maybe put a buffalo robe in there, and just be able to have some peace and calmness, and to reflect, and to pray, just have that available. There doesn't have to be a formal presentation, or it doesn't have to be a formal activity, but just to have that available. So Jeff Stacy Eagle Out was sharing in an earlier meeting that they have, she's going to have 2 teepees, and that's what they're for, for the programs to use, to promote that healing. So I think that's, that's just wonderful, that resource will be there. Jean, I bet you have a whole bunch of thoughts. What are you thinking?
Thank you for this presentation. It's always good to listen and learn. It's this information is so valuable that it is in the programs that we have. I believe especially the ones here at the Great Plains, it'd be good to start to incorporate this in their daily sessions, and working with the youth and the adults and those in recovery that come for help, just to give them a brochure or something like this, just to let them review it and help them to reconnect to us, because many of this is not out there anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really good, and I appreciate it. Just keeping in your mind praying all day long is very helpful. Just to give thanks and to understand who we are. So I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I'd just like to share that, those of you that would want to make this into a poster, maybe put it in your classroom, or, use it as a teaching tool with the people that you're working with, or your own family, then you're welcome to do that. I'm not much of an artist. I would say, what is Lonnie Jeffries is an artist, and she does some wonderful, graphic work. So if we have the resources for her to, develop this more into a more visual, representation of what we're trying to convey, then I think that would be wonderful, because a lot of our people will pay attention if there's something visual. So That's a thought suggestion. What about Amanda Clary? What are you thinking? What's your thoughts? You're speaking, we can't hear you. Maybe she's away from her desk or having technical difficulties. How about Nathania Toja? Nathania Knight.
Hello to Ethleen.
Hi.
This is you know me as Laurel.
Oh, hi, Toja.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Just really consuming all of this great information. I feel like, this is God, God our creator has his ways, and bringing me back, to this circle that I'm in today. I'm very grateful, and taking me back to childhood memories. But this is all great information, and just really serving as a good reminder of who I am. And also the circle that, I come from. I work at South Dakota State University. And a lot of the time it feels like I'm always thinking different than, my colleagues, or, they're all Washichu. And being the pretty much only Lakota in this area with the school, it just this is really, all great information. And I was just thinking about, all of these 7 spiritual laws, and, just like with always having Wa'unshila and carrying that with me, having wala humility and the Woksape, all these teachings, my unchi, she taught me. And then also, just waking up, early in the morning at the Sundance there, at Uncle Rick's, right? It's just, I'm just consuming all of this, and it's so good. And it feels so good, to be reviving this, relearning these ways. And I'm just, I'm overwhelmed right now, but in a good way. I feel good. I'm doing well. Our family as well. But I just, I wanted to extend my thank yous.
Thank you, Toja. Glad you could be here and join us. Yeah, I get overwhelmed too whenever I think about the gifts that were given to us, and the how we were taken away or disconnected from those gifts, and reconnecting to them is like a journey, and sometimes it is a painful journey, because the things that we need to sacrifice in order to live this way, it gets hard sometimes, it gets overwhelming, but at the same time, it's the most beautiful gifts that, we could receive are these, like these laws and how they're expressed, our, our kinship, we were given everything to be in balance. So reconnecting or taking that journey to reconnect is, really a personal choice, but I think we have to do that for our children and our grandchildren, because all of us in here, I think, want the same thing. And that's for our children and our grandchildren to be healthy and happy, you know, and to have their culture and their language. So this Lakota mental health first aid model was developed with that in mind, that we take a piece, you know, we take a piece of what was given to us and apply it. So like the wotakuya, the kinship, the wa'oshila, you know, the compassion, you know, all the wotakuya is very key to everything, you know, as far as like the kinship, because if we see these children, young people, and families as relatives, then there's a different dynamic that you know, develops, and there's a different feeling, I guess, and then there's a bond that's created. It's no longer about client or patient, you know, or even students. It's about, you know, being relatives and wanting the best for them, you know. So it's pretty basic, but it's also involved in complex. So this wotakuya again is you know, the collective wo, the collective, the sacred taku, what is or who is valued, yeah, going into the future. So we value our relatives going into the future, you know, and this leads to wayu oni hampi. You know, wayu oni hampi is from the word yuoniha. Whenever you oniha something, then you're kind of like extending honor to it. Wayu oni hampi is like the plural, how you express that, respecting others, respecting, you know, ourselves. So whenever we have, we use kinship terms, and what we're doing is we're chekicha. Whenever we chekicha, look at the word there. It's broken down. Whenever you break it down, it's cha, which is cry. But again, that's the sincere expression of our heart. Whenever we're real happy, you know, tears will come to our eyes. Whenever we're real angry, whenever we're real sad, you know, we have very strong emotions and tears come to our eyes, and that's natural. You know, a lot of times you'll hear people shed tears or become tearful or cry, and then they'll apologize. They'll say, sorry, you know, and we don't need to apologize for that, because what we're doing is we're having a healthy release, you know, of whatever emotion that is. So that cha is in there, that sincere expression. Gichi with, yeah, going into the future. So chekicha is not just, you know, like using the kinship terms. What it is, it's honoring or appealing, setting a path with that relative. So whenever we say, if I say shicheshi, then what I'm saying is I'm honoring you, I'm respecting, I'm extending, you know, this honor and respect to you, and as a relative, you know. So that then establishes not only a bond, but it also establishes boundaries, you know, like I don't cross certain boundaries with my shicheshi, you know, with my the ones that I call shicheshi, like a male cousin, like so. And then my jepkanshi, you know, like I don't cross certain boundaries with them, the female, you know, relatives. So it gives us a guidance, you know, for how we conduct ourselves and how we think, you know. So if we say, like say the use of kinship terms with the children, like toshka, toja, nephew, niece, hakoja, grandchild, you know, then if we use those terms, then we're saying, this is my relative. And then that in turn will inform the behavior or the conduct. I will treat this person as my relative, and I have a responsibility to treat each other, to treat, you know, this person not only as a relative, but, you know, as a treasured relative, you know. So it's hard in these days because, you know, families are families, extended families, you know, there's things that happen with families, and there's things that happen within kyoshbais that will break that bond and might cause a rift, you know. So it is a challenge, but I think that challenge is given to us to really enforce, what we believe, and to really drive home the need to, have the honor the kinship, so it does get difficult. But then again, on the other hand, if we teach our children that, then perhaps in the future they will be the ones to, again, as a standard, use kinship terms with everybody, treat each other, as relatives. So, we're reconnecting, we're laying that groundwork, and all of us in this circle here are, a part of that, as far as responsibility goes, because we all have children and grandchildren. So this wotapi is really important. We have a belief that everything has a spirit. So if we have, like a relationship where we don't use the kinship terms, where we call each other down, where we argue, that has a spirit. And that will inform like the dynamics of the relationship. So if we have that as an ongoing pattern, then what we're doing is we're building that culture, not culture in terms of ethnic or racial culture, but culture in terms of group dynamics, culture in terms of beliefs and language and, whatever it is, practices, attitudes, and that can all be negative. So we have to really acknowledge that everything has a spirit. So illness has a spirit. One of the things that was shared, as guidance for us, that believe that way, that have the woichala that way, is that whenever you have an illness or somebody has an illness, to respect the power of it, not respect the illness, but to respect the power that it does have, and to talk to it, talk to the spirit of that illness in a way that, is, important to acknowledge that it does exist, that it's a physical manifestation, but it's also a it has a spirit that can be talked to, and ask that spirit of that illness to leave and to make an offering, to do that. Years ago, there was, some of our male relatives were having a really hard time, with addiction, drinking, and many of the female and male relatives, the older ones, were kind of at a loss of what to do. So they took some offerings and they, they prayed about it. And the guidance that was given to them was to, well, this addiction does have a spirit, and it's attached itself to this person. So it's really hard for this person to quit drinking, to quit drugging. So take an offering out, way out where nobody goes, and acknowledge that spirit of that addiction and ask that spirit to leave your relative alone. And so these individuals did do that. And it was at a time whenever, we thought that we might lose them, to the addiction. And that was probably, 10 years ago. So that was really an important lesson to know that, that we need to acknowledge the power and the spirit of that, that illness or that addiction. But it was also a reminder too, to not to wring our hands, and say, well, what can we do, but to really make that effort and, make the offerings and go out, and not to have to be, told that. So that was an important lesson, and one that, we try to teach the younger ones in our Tioshpai about, if you do have, like, say, a bad dream, for example, that in a Lakota worldview, that's a warning. So then what do we do? So we get up, we pray, we make an offering, we take it out, and we pray that that dream doesn't come true, So there's things that we can be, how would you say it? We can be proactive about, that we don't have to just wait for something bad to happen, that we can try to intervene and try to prevent it. So the spirit, illness, grief, loss, anger, rage, trauma, violence, everything has a spirit. Some of you might have experienced walking into a meeting where there was a group of people that had a meeting and there was a lot of tension. And whenever you walk in, then they quit talking. But you can feel it, you can feel that tension. That's that spirit of that, what has happened there. So we're told that, it's real important to wazilia, to smudge your home, your office, your space. Make sure that it's smudged out really good, because there's a lot of things that can hang in the air that can attach itself to you too, So illness, people's anger, people's rage, we don't want to take that home to our families. So it's real important to really smudge off before we go home. But also we don't want to take things from the home to the workplace. So then it's important to smudge off before we go to work also. So that's why that wokpan is really important, is because we acknowledge that everything has a spirit, and that without that wazilia, the smudging, all of that, the cultural intervention, it can lead to the negativity being, transmitted to our relatives, to our coworkers, to our children, our grandchildren, and it can become like a pattern. And we don't want that to happen. We want to, stop, make sure that it's stopped in its tracks. So acknowledging that everything has a spirit is real important. So whenever, like say, in the Lakota mental health first aid model, then there's times that we've been asked to go into homes where there was a death by suicide. And so we acknowledge the spirit of that individual, even though they have passed on, then we will talk to them. But first we wazilia, because when something like that happens, like a death by suicide or your death by violence, then there's still that energy there. There's still that spirit of what happened there. So we need to have that wokpa, the spirit toolkit, with us at all times in case we do encounter that. So whenever we got called into homes where there was a death by suicide, then we would first of all wazilia, and then have a prayer, and then talk to the spirit of the one that passed on, because what we know is that they're still there. Their body, the spirit has left the body, but they're still there. So we talk to them and we try to comfort them, because just think about, it's unimaginable, dying in that manner, and then not being able to talk to the people that are there, or not being able to communicate with them, and feeling so alone, and this is a very traumatic death, so traumatic passing, so they need that comfort too. So we would have the officers there, because they wouldn't let the family go, where the person has died by suicide. So it would just be us and the police officers. And then because it's, they're Lakota police officers, and they would, wazilia, they would smudge themselves off too. And they would respect that, that prayer and talking to the spirit of that individual. And then we would go into with the family, no words, just prayer, maybe a song, no words, because there's no words for this. There's no words to, express or convey, what happened. So just being with them, being silent, offering that wazilia, offering that prayer, offering the, song if it's appropriate. But a lot of times people are so devastated, and overwhelmed that you might just have to sit back and, and wait and just sit there and pray silently with them, So it really depends on the situation. But again, acknowledging the spirit of individuals, of emotions, of illness, of everything, that's always there, that's always acknowledged. So one of the healing ceremonies that's relevant to all of this, so we would always advise, people to, if they've been through something traumatic, like even if it wasn't traumatic death. So whenever my father died, when my mother died, when my sister died, then I was, it was, the deaths were expected, I guess, because we knew that they would go, but we didn't, it was still the same, it was still devastating, and it was still really, really difficult, and it's a wound, it's an actual wound. So what we're advised to do is to be really humble during that time and not to get, really angry or upset or, blame anybody for what's happened. And we're advised to keep to ourselves, for during the mourning period, like the wake, the funeral, and then 4 days after the funeral, then to go into the OTP, the purification lodge, and to release some of that, in a healthy way, and then to come out and wipe ourselves with sage, because the grief does have a spirit and we don't want to carry it back into the community. So that transition from mourning doesn't mean we're done grieving. It's, we're still, grieving, but we're in a mourning period. So the 4 days after the body is, buried, or the funeral, then we're advised to wipe ourselves with sage, so that we're wiping away that the spirit of that intense mourning, so that we can transit back to the community and back to our regular activities, whatever those are, whether it's work or school or with our family. So the Wopa Kinte, whenever it's done for for trauma, then usually an older person will be designated, will be given tobacco to wipe that individual off with sage. And it is gender specific. So like, say if it's a boy or a man, then another man, an older man will do that for them. And if it's a girl or a young woman, then an older woman will do the ceremony for them. So this Wopa Kinte, wo is collective, pa kinta is to wipe. So the wo also implies like sacredness. So it's a sacred cleansing, a sacred purification, Again, our Lakota language, English, it's hard to translate, concepts into English. It doesn't mean just one thing. So this is like one of the first, the first ceremonies, or the first interventions, whatever we want to call it, after something traumatic has happened. So that's why, with the various programs that are out there, like the mental health, behavioral health programs, whenever you look at the relatives that come to you, they're carrying a lot. They might have layers and layers of things that have happened, like maybe a trauma when they were a child, or maybe multiple losses, they're still carrying a lot of grief, So whatever it is that they want to start with, because it's not like a one-time thing, like I'm still going through my healing journey. So whenever I recall something, then I know that I need a Wopa Kinte for, then I know that it's the right time to do it. So whatever it is that is, that person wants to start with, then that's where we start. And then we don't say, well, this is going to cure you, or this is going to, this is going to be the healing. It's going to start the healing. So I think that's important to acknowledge. So I'm looking at the time, and we have 3:18. Do you want to take a break, or do you want to have your discussion and then end? Because again, these are, kind of intense discussions, intense information, I guess. So what do you suggest? I'm leaving it all up to you. Do you want to have your feedback now, Or do you want to take a break and then have your feedback? Once we have feedback, that's whenever we'll end. Leaving it up to you.
I suggest, well, Patty, Eagle put now. I'm not sure if that's now for a break or now to discuss.
Just gonna see Patty. You mean now for a break or now to discuss?
Discuss.
Okay, all right. So just gonna see Patty, you're first. Don't mean to pick on you, but do you want to start the feedback?
You're right, this is very emotional. We've had, when I think about our Wopa Kinte, I think of all of those who are in need of that now because of the COVID and the impacts that it's had to our family and our relatives. And the need for not only our family and our elders, but our children. You mentioned in Rapid, you see a lot of our relatives, you know, you see them walking around and you hear the stories, and we know the need because of, I think of the Koi program and the amount of relatives that they're helping just in that one program. The need to share and make available the ceremonies to help them to heal, so that they have that belonging. And I really appreciate you sharing this. I hope that with the programs and what we're trying to do by helping everybody to learn is to provide more teachings and learnings to those who need it. A lot of them don't have that foundation. They weren't raised that way. But I think, like you said, we all have that within us. We all have that knowledge, but maybe not in this lifetime, you know. They have maybe the desire to be able to walk this path. And I think about the elders that have taught us that aren't here anymore. What we can offer, you know, how we can help them to learn and to grow. Because with me, it was how I learned to be myself, you know, to accept being somebody who could help others. Part of that growth. So just want to offer that up and thank you for sharing and for teaching us and everything that you offer.
Thank you, Wopila. I appreciate your thoughts, your feedback. Joy, Joy, so sorry if I said that wrong. Do you have any thoughts, anything you'd like to share? If you're talking, you're on mute. You might have, she might have stepped away. Katie Corey, any thoughts?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can barely hear you all right now. It's just been an amazing experience to listen to everything over the last 2 weeks and to hear everyone's perspective and experiences. I just want to say thank you. Coming from my experiences and the things that I know and things that I've been through over the last couple of years, like I said, I just appreciate this opportunity to learn and grow with you. I just want you to know that I'm here for all of you, and just thank you.
Thank you, Hojan. Appreciate your comments. Stacy Azure, would you like to share anything? You're talking, you're on mute. Okay, she might be away. Just want to see Jackie. Any thoughts you want to share?
She's having technical difficulties.
Okay. Chelsea Marshall, any feedback you'd like to give? I'm most interested in how you think this can be applied, not just you, but for everybody, you know, putting it into action.
Okay. Am I on the air? Can you hear me?
You are on the air.
Hello. This is Jackie. I've been kind of listening to all that that you've been talking about, and kind of going back to the 7 laws and how we learn and how we learn it, living it, and that we don't know that we know, but we do these things, you know. And I know my sisters and I talked about it, and although that we're not Lakota speakers, we talked about the things that we did, that we learned, that we were taught. So like the compassion and the generosity and different things and how we did it, you know. And when someone came to your home, you always fed them, and always remember mom giving them something, a gift or something, you know. And so we kind of looked at that and how we did it, and we discovered that we still do that, you know. That when somebody comes that we haven't seen for a while, we'll give them something, feed them, and share a meal, and catch up with each other's families and stuff. And so was talking about that, and I was telling about my grandson. He is 11, and talked about offering the food after sweat and stuff, and praying and stuff. And he kind of came over to me and whispered, "Grandma, did you feed those Indians? Did you pray and feed those Indians?" About the spirit plate. So that's cute how they learn. Yeah. So and looking at that, teaching them to pray in the morning and asking for a good day, and then at night saying thank you. You know, so we do it without really saying this is what we're going to do. You know, this is so that's kind of what we're working at with our grandchildren, and teaching them relatives. You know, this is your cousin, this is your uncle, you're an uncle. You know, they're all surprised at their uncles and aunties. But also that the healing ceremonies of our communities, our tioshpayes, you know, that all that grief, you know, there's so much grief and there's so many orphans, you know, and it's really heartbreaking. So it's good that we teach them to smudge often, smudge and pray in their own words, you know. A lot of them say that they never pray, but just talk in your own words, you know, what you say. Those little things. And yesterday we were just talking about that storm coming up. We always try to carry extra gloves and caps and stuff, you know, in case we see someone walking on the road, walking on the street with no caps and gloves, you know, we always have something to give them. So those kind of things, you know, that you got to teach them to do that. And it's good to see that there's more lodges here coming up in the city so that people can learn that way. You know, they don't have that opportunity or the way to go home and go to the inipis and learn, you know, that they can come here, and that people bring people, you know, to come and so to wipe off and pray. So that's one good thing that I see. But I thank you. I thank you for doing this. And
thank you, Chef Machi. And I just wanted to comment on what you said, you know, about doing things automatically, like when people come, you feed them, you know, you give them something. I think that's your ancestral memory, you know, that's in your Jik memory, you know, that it's passed down, you know. That's why I said, you know, all of you, most of you, not all of you know these things already, you know, so it might trigger something within you, like, oh yeah, you know, like that. This is just like a reminder. It's not anything new to you.
Yeah,
you know, So thank you for your comment.
Yes.
Qingxi, Eugene, any thoughts?
Oh, Ina, Opila, for the presentation that you just went over. And some of the things that really caught my attention from what you were talking about was, well, a while back when I helped out the Ampowi Chakpi with the teepee setup and the knowledge behind it. That's one thing that stuck out was the in that teaching that was passed down to me was, you know, the poles represent the tushu represents the men, and the ti agakbe, the cover, represents like the mother, you know, wrapping her arms around, and also the ipasise, the ti ipasise, the wihumpaspa, the pegs, you know, those are the children that ground us, you know. Without any of those elements and those components, you know, it wouldn't be strong. The teepee wouldn't hold, it'll crumble. So, you know, each part has an important role, and that taking that concept and applying it to the work that I do now with, I'm a fatherhood coordinator. So, you know, being able to teach that and remind the fathers about, you know, even the teaching that happened, or the teaching with the teepee, you know, that helped me. There was a time in 2017 when I was having a hard time and grieving, you know, and I was asked to do that teaching for the teepee teaching, and you know, I wasn't really feeling up to it, but whenever I got into it and started doing it, I noticed that it started to help me, you know, help me heal, and and having those young women that were at that school, you know, that was healing itself. So, you know, that's one thing that I forget, you know, some of these things that we do, they're healing, and the teachings that go along with it, you know, it's powerful. And You know, even at the Wiwangwa Chipi, the Sundance, when we set up the teepee and we do it the right way, we always notice that it holds up. No disrespect to any of my Crow relatives, but there's a teepee that was set up in their way, but it was the only teepee that fell down. Now, I'm not saying anything disrespectful in that aspect, but you know, whenever we do things right accordingly, you know, and have these teachings in sight whenever we're doing it, it'll hold up and stay strong. I'll hit you too.
Ropila, thank you for your comments. And I think those, you know, the healing energy that you received from providing the teaching, you know, that's like fulfilling a responsibility to your younger relatives. And that's for all of us, you know. There's teaching about grief that, you know, we're supposed to stay in that humble state, you know, during our mourning period, and we're supposed to do something good, you know, for others, you know, and that's going to strengthen us. And, you know, like you said, you know, you didn't really feel like it, but you did it, and it, you know, it helped you, it strengthened you. So that's that circle, you know, that we put something out there and it comes back to us. And likewise, if we put something negative out there, then it's going to circle back and come back, you know, to us too. So it's either or, but I really appreciate you, you know, sharing what you did, Opila. Any last comments? And you know, I can't get to everybody, but the ones that I'm seeing, then I call your name, but and sometimes people might think that I'm overlooking others, but then it's just the ones that I see, because I can only see my screen and see some of you. So any last comment?
Tui, Ethleen, this is Shriva. I just wanted to thank you for doing this teaching and training. I don't really know how to express my feelings because it's so important. Even the things that you're sharing brings back memories, because I was raised by my grandma, and it not only reminds me, but it also pushes me to push leadership in our own people, like even when in our program with our co-workers, with our participants, teaching them to pray, and relaying that as it's just talking with the Creator, that you know, some people have that belief of only an elder can pray, or only a certain person can pray. And I'm a strong believer in cultural understanding is a part of healing. It's the foundation of our people healing. And it starts, like you said, with us. So I appreciate everything that you have gone through in your life so that you're able to teach us, because it helps us to give back to our people. I never keep anything in that I learn. I give it right back out the minute that I learn it, because we're living in a time now that we don't know if we have tomorrow. You know, we literally live the day that we have and live it to the fullest and to the best, and share with our family and our friends what we know. So I appreciate the training, and it's very healing to my heart and to my mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Koja. I share your sentiment about giving back. You know, that's part of our way. So thank you for that. Any other last comments?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Mary Rose George Gonzalez, and my native given name from my maternal grandmother is Ananaipum. I'm an enrolled Yakima here on the Yakima Reservation. And you know, I joined late, and I'm sorry for that, because I couldn't get in. For one, it kept telling me that I could not get into the meeting, so they sent me another link, and so I got in very late, so I missed a lot. But from what I've heard, you know, it has, you know, just like the other speakers have stated, it has brought back a lot of memories. And for me, you know, we were taught by all of our elders, our uncles, aunts, grandparents, my mom and dad. We used to have classes at our longhouse once a week, teaching all the kids how to sing and how to serve food and what it all means. And you know, so it brought back those memories for me. And, you know, the fact that they're all gone now and that, you know, we've become the elders, which is scary because I don't know half as much as what they were, you know, attempting to teach us when we were 15 years old. And so, you know, when I was, I got into the meeting when you were talking about teepee, and I don't recall hearing any teachings in our way about the teepee, but in looking at your diagram, what we were taught was more along the lines of our longhouse and the drum. And so the drum that we use, we were always told those represent the Sundays, 52 Sundays of the year. You know, it was like the calendar, and it represents God's laws. Tamanwitla is what we call God in our language. And so, you know, and the Wayan-Chi, who is the leader of the longhouse, would open up the heavens and summon God by our services. And so the numbered beats of the drum were represented, and we had to recognize through the announcement, you know, what was going to happen, you know, with an opening prayer. And we had 7 songs that represented the days of the week. And we did everything in threes because the feather, the eagle feather for us, represents the 3 promises that Tamanwitla gave us, which was birth, life, and death, and that we needed to live by God's laws, and we don't have any man-made written laws. And so our philosophy was that Creator is there to help us understand and to protect our way of life and to teach others and be educated. And, you know, not be materialistic, because, you know, we were came into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. And so, you know, I learned a lot in the short time I was here, and it brought back all those memories. And you know, I'm mainly here today because I have been hired. You worked for the tribe, for my tribe, for 26 years. And then, well, other things came up, and now I'm working for mental health, our comprehensive mental health here in Yakima, and as the cultural competence liaison. So in taking their, you know, I work along a lot of non-Indians who want to learn more about how to be culturally sensitive to the Native American way of life, so that they don't offend them, because we have crisis responders that are non-Indian, and they have to respond on the reservation to some of the crisis situations that our enrolled members face. And I have taken the mental health first aid through our organization, and it's pretty much, I guess you could say, well, like the white man teach. You know, they don't go through things and subjects as deep as what has been discussed today. They go through their QPR, suicide intervention, their question, persuade, and refer, clarifying questions, and just being direct about, do you want to kill yourself? And, you know, and matters like that. And So I've learned what I needed to through here, and what interested me about the advertisement I saw on Facebook about today's session was, the fact that you talk about incorporating the cultures and belief into the mental health first aid. So I was kind of here to learn more about how you do that, and to learn from each of you how I could convey that to our tribal members that go through our organization for mental health treatment, and how I could possibly, alter the mental health first aid here to incorporate the beliefs of the people here. So, so I'm kind of like in a learning situation of how that would look here in an Indian organization.
Well, I wish you all the best in your work, Jefferson, Mary Rose, and welcome to Lakota country. Even though we're all here virtual, you're from the Northwest, so I know that all my Lakota relatives, all my relatives here welcome you to this circle. Thank you. Okay, so why don't we take a stretch? Reach way up to the sky, acknowledge Ampewi, like you can see the sun, our relative, come down, acknowledge Unchimaka, the healing energy from Unchimaka, clasp your hands together, push out, feel that stretch in your back, put your feet flat on the floor, twist around to the left, come back to the center, twist to the right, and acknowledge Makasi Domini, everything in the universe. Do some shoulder rolls, wiggle your feet, wiggle your hands, shake your hands out. We've been sitting for a while. And Jean, I apologize for putting you on the spot, but can you do our closing? And we'll see you all on the 21st. And we're not meeting on the 28th. We're meeting on that first Thursday in November. That'll be our last session. Yes, Jean. Any closing comment, Toja Alpina?
Nasana Knight said, very healing today. For some reason, I am meant to be here today. I am grateful. Wopila Tumi, I am happy to be a part of this circle today. All great information, consuming it all, and remembering these teachings that I may have lost touch with. Wopila for reminding me.
Thank you, Toja. Okay, so Jean, can you close us out? We can transition to a great evening, whatever we're going to do.
Okay, thank you. I really want to thank you, Hakashi, for this great information you presented us. I know we will all use it well in our work, in our daily lives. So, Wopila. Ho Tunkashla, Wakantaka, Wila Wopila, Shujia Tunkashla, Wamonkia Hill. Tunkashla, thank you for being with us today and helping us to understand and absorb. And I pray you help us retain this information that was presented to us today so we can be better relatives for those that come to us for help. I humbly ask you watch over Ankashu Ethleen and her family and all of those that attended today and their families. Be with us and watch over our communities and our world, Ankashu. How mitake oyase.
Mitakuye oyase, Wopila Kanka, Sayatu Washte, Yuhapie. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.